Battlefield 6 Season 1 is here. While we have a lot to discover with RedSec, the new multiplayer content, a battle pass, and other visible items, today we're jumping in and taking a look at gameplay changes as a result of the newest update 1.1.1.0 and what you should be aware of. As we go along, drop your thoughts down below. Make sure you drop a like if you enjoy or you find it at all insightful, and do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all things Battlefield 6, among other FPS content here. Seriously, you have so much coming this week with the Season 1 launch, the RedSec launch, Arc Raiders later this week. It's the busiest week in the channel's history, but I couldn't be more excited to share this journey to 700,000 subscribers and all the content coming along with it with you. Also, make sure you stick around for the live streams later today, both here on YouTube and over on Twitch, where there will be drops enabled, meaning you can get a few limited time skins for just simply having a stream open. But anyways, let's get into it. So let's take a look at Season 1's update and what changed. Starting with the big ticket items here, movement was one of the things that was adjusted with this update, where they said this includes things like the core movement animations, landing animations, making those smoother, faster stance animations, better vaulting behavior, and a reduction in bouncing issues that have been persisting with that animation as well. So all in all, it should make your overall movement experience feel a little bit more fluid, a bit smoother, and something that just feels a little bit more natural compared to some of the situations you and your character may have been in from launch until now. The biggest thing I think personally affecting the entirety of the gameplay experience, though, is the weapon dispersion fix that came along with this update. This was a huge element of maybe what felt off about gunfights in Battlefield 6 since the game's launch. While spread and bloom is an intended design decision, like that's something that is consciously in the game, the prior version that we saw up until this update was not the intended design for that, but rather a bugged version of it that seems to exaggerate those effects more than the default. So a lot of players were noticing this by and far from launch until now, but it was mentioned they reworked weapon dispersion to better align accuracy and handling with the weapon's intended design. These changes addressed cases where accuracy behaved inconsistently, such as dispersion not properly settling after sprinting, and bringing overall firing behavior closer to the intended balance between precision, control, and weapon power. So the big thing really that they kind of identified here, and may have been something you had caught notice of as well, was the settling of that dispersion cone after sprinting. Obviously, it's supposed to be tighter, and something when you're standing still, you're not going to notice that all that much, but after sprinting, it seemed like that persisted throughout the launch version of the game. So that should be fixed. Having played some Season 1 gameplay early last week for our capture session that we ended up showcasing some of the gameplay here on the channel, during that play session, it definitely did feel better. I would imagine that was the same build here that we see with Season 1. But as we'll mention at the end of the video as well, recording this early so that it's ready to go at the specific time on update day, because the rest of today is crazy, there may be some things that happen from the launch of the update itself to when this is seen that something might have gone wrong, but fingers crossed, and the intended design, it was better. Now, additionally, there were other weapon adjustments made, one of the big ones being that sniper rifles with any class other than recon will now no longer increase that weapon spread. That was a huge issue from launch until, of course, now, again, because if you ended up having a sniper in assault, engineer, or support, you would not have that same pinpoint precision as if you were playing with recon. What they did with this is the weapon sway will now begin during the zoom transition, which allows you to maintain balance and distinguishing recon's precision advantage, but does not take away from the core experience of sniping in a different class. They also fixed the more minor things like misalignment issues with the top mounted red dot sights, so that meaning you wouldn't be actually shooting where your dot was aiming. They fixed an issue where the long suppressor used the wrong attachment point cost for some weapons, so you wouldn't be able to use that. So obviously messing a little bit with the ecosystem of the pick 100, if you want to call that. They also balanced the sledgehammer damage against world objects for better consistency. And as they mentioned later on in the patch notes, this actually made it so that buildings take more hits from the sledgehammer before they do get destroyed. They also had smaller things like optic issues, reticle settling, and an issue where players couldn't leave the firing range. Those have all been fixed out. But the next big thing up on the docket was the visibility for Battlefield 6. They said significant visibility and lighting adjustments were made with better exposure transitions, interior lighting, and reduced fog and smoke persistence. So the big thing, the big target with that was obviously if you were to go from inside to out or outside to in, there is, of course, that natural, retinal adjustment on an actual soldier. That type of situation is replicated with these games, but it was just something that was a bit too extreme, taking away from the natural flow of the gameplay, that they did adjust that as well. Some maps saw some specific adjustments, the big things being they fixed across multiple different locations, resolving spawn animations, out of bounds issues, misaligned assets, and general stability across conquest, breakthrough, and rush modes. There were a few more minor things like zipline carabiner appearing offset and you'd fly off the wire next to it instead of on top of it. That squad names are now randomized at the start of squad deathmatch matches, so you're not always going to have the same team name or anything like that. They added visible bomb meshes to armed MCOMs and Rush. They updated overtime UI visualization across all modes. Stuff like that, more minor things that you'll see on screen now, but are relatively inconsequential to your gameplay experience more than likely. There are also a few minor adjustments to problems that were more so, I'd say, bugs across a lot of different specific maps, but to save the monotony of going into every single detail about that, on screen you can see those scrolling, and you can see if you've had any issues with that. But vehicles, they fixed missing haptic feedback when switching between tank weapons. They fixed the visual issue where players' hands clipped with the M1A2 SEP V3 handle when sitting in external seats. But the one thing when we talk about vehicles that was not updated was a fix for the IFV painted guided lock-on missiles. This was something that for those that are aerial combat specialists, you have a helicopter, you have a jet, you're probably getting one-shotted out of the air by these things just all the time. Like, it actually, for a lot of the gameplay that I've seen, has kind of broke aerial combat, where there is no countermeasures to that rocket. It is just something that's a lock-on and guided and is doing a one-hit kill. Somebody can just sit in the back of their HQ and just counter every single aerial vehicle in the game. Now, this was confirmed to be a bug where there are no countermeasures available, but DICE developers mentioned that this has already been addressed by the team, but it's quite unfortunate that it's not included in this fix. With, I think I saw another developer saying it's still about an update or two away. Whether or not that's something that actually plays into like the major updates that we see today and then in 3 weeks for phase 2 of season 1, or in 3 weeks after that with phase 3 of season 1, we don't quite know if it'll be those or if it'll come sooner, but it is something that's being worked on. It's just not in this build just yet. Audio, they fixed an issue where footstep sounds were missing when moving with the knife equipped. Obviously, a big problem there. If somebody has their knife out, of course they are faster, but they can definitely sneak up on you then because you would not be able to hear them coming. They also fixed a voice line issue where directional callouts, for example, when they say enemy north, they played the wrong direction. That's actually something that I noticed quite a few times in game, where I'd hear call out, I'd look in that direction, and then it's just, there's nothing there. It's just in like open field or something like that with no one in it. So nice to see that. They said they polished projectile audio with new missile, rocket pod, and cannon shell flyby effects, and also improved distance handling and overall mix for more realistic impact sounds. So polishing that off a bit here and making it something that's a bit more visceral per se. Then we of course had a bunch of other smaller changes to the audio, like adding radio chatter through controller speakers, fixing missing or incorrect ambient and directional sounds across several maps like Siege of Cairo. Stuff like that, that again, relatively more inconsequential, but changes that were made no less. On screen, you can see those once again. As for your UI and HUD for some of these changes, we saw new markers for newly unlocked weapons, weapon packages, attachments, gadgets, and throwables, basically just allowing you to quickly find out what you unlocked, find it, and either clear it or equip it if you wanted to. They added new preview videos demonstrating how gadgets work, which is definitely cool, and they fixed an issue where the Battlefield 6 ownership XP boost did not display properly at the end of the round. Now, it's not specified, but by the wording, it seems like it's just a visual thing that it didn't showcase, but it was being applied, even though it wasn't showcasing in that post-match progression update. And then again, a couple of smaller things here and there that on screen you can see that full listing as well. Settings to round everything out, they added a flick look bind to helicopters, jets, and transport control schemes, which is definitely cool. That being a way to quickly swap 180 degrees there and just see completely behind you, which could be beneficial for those that end up utilizing this, but for a lot of players, it might not be something you really interact with all that much. And they also fixed some visual issues with aspect ratio settings, but other than that, one thing that, again, to close out on is that it is possible that things break based off this update. Absolutely. Game development is an absolute house of cards, and moving one thing in one area can upset the whole balance elsewhere, thus having unintended consequences. As of the time of making this video, this is a pre-recorded one, and the update is not physically in front of me, as it will be by the time you may watch this, so I can't comment on the state of the game, where it may be, for better or for worse, at the very moment. We'll see what happens in time, but for the time being, that's the update. That's what the patch notes have laid out for you and what you can expect out of this update to kick off Season 1. So a lot of content still up on deck. Again, I'm going to be streaming a lot here today for both Season 1 and RedSec content. We'll likely have another video later tonight as well, but for now, that's where we're going to wrap it up. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you found it insightful. Drop a comment, drop a like. Make sure to subscribe for more, and I'll see you out on the battlefield. We got Season 1 ahead of us and a lot to do. Until the next one, take care and peace.